All right, here we go. Welcome everyone to Lambda School's mini bootcamp lesson number 6. Today we're going to be going over HTML and CSS, a lot of fun stuff. We'll be going over some solutions to a few of the problems from last night's homework. Let's get us started off. Okay. All right. Yeah, for those of you that have questions about our full-time courses, feel free to reach out to me or Austin. We can help you out there. If anyone's looking for spots for the February course, that is full at the moment, and so. But we'd love to have you come and sign up for our March class. So if you're interested, if you want, we can waitlist you for the February class. So in case somebody cancels or something comes up, then we can, maybe slot you in. So if you want to get on a wait list for February, we could do that. Otherwise, I would love to have you come and attend our March course. So again, full week or a full-time 6-month long, 26-week course. And we teach the fundamentals of computer science and full stack application development. All right, let's dive in and do some code. Okay, let's do a screen share. All right. Okay, so we're going to go into some HTML, CSS stuff a little bit later. But first, let's take a look at work from last night. So I have some solutions already filled in. Just I quickly ran through some of these. I might refactor them as we walk through it. But let's go over this invoke callback, specifically this one and that one. I was just making sure the tests work, but I'll do that with you guys in a moment. All right, so invoke callback. Okay, so this one's pretty basic. The main thing here is that we get a callback function passed in. So again, it's a function being passed into another function, or a reference to another function getting passed in, and we invoke it inside of a different function. So in JavaScript, it's all about functions. Functions are getting passed around and used everywhere. There's lots of things we can do with them. There's a style of programming that we a lot of these principles we use in JavaScript is called functional programming. Some languages, that's something that for another day, but it's a programming paradigm, and it makes heavy use of using functions. And JavaScript is one of the languages that operates more closely to a functional programming paradigm. And so it's just we're using functions very in a very flexible manner, and we're using them all over the place. So we pass functions into other functions, and functions can return functions too. And but that's a discussion for another day. Okay, so this is all that needs to be done for this one to pass. Okay, so let's look at for each. Okay, so what we're going to do is we need to iterate over array and then pass every value into the CB one by one. Okay, so this is kind of tricky at first, but here's how we do it. I'm going to make a for loop. And and these are probably the hardest problems in the whole pre-course work. So it's so many of you you probably need help with these, and if you really struggled on it, that's fine. It is expected that you're gonna struggle on these. So if you breezed through them, then good for you. You're in a really good spot. Okay, so we're just iterating over an array. So again, if you go back a couple lessons, this is just the basic code for iterating over an array from left to right. And then we're just going to call the callback function and pass in each item one by one. So that's what this is going to do. So array at index I. So just like with console.log, like if you're trying to, and if you want to get more practice with this, just make an array and then try to console log every item that's in the array one by one. Just try to do that. And then do it backwards, do it forwards and backwards, and then console log every other item in the array. And, and try to just get comfortable with that manipulation around an array, because that's just a really, really important concept. And if you can get more comfortable with like loops and arrays, that's so much of or that is such a common task that we're doing in JavaScript. So we're just going to iterate over it, and we're going to invoke the callback function, and I believe that will pass it. I don't think it needs the next. The I is the second argument. Usually a for each function will also ask for the index or the count as the second argument, but I don't think that the tests require that here. Okay. All right, so let's look at the map. So this one, people had a lot of questions on, and I figured out how to make a sketch work. So now I can actually do a little diagram with it. Okay. Thanks for the haircut compliment. All right, so okay, so with the map, the idea with the map is you have an array here. Okay, so you have some values in it, and so say 5, 10, 15, and 20. And so we have this array, and what we're going to do is we're going to pass each item through a transformation function. This function can be whatever we provide. This is the callback function. And so we're going to take all the items in our array, and we're going to pass them through the function. And then the output that comes out, we're going to go and stick them into this new array. Okay. So it's so we're going to start by passing the 5 in, and then whatever this spits out, we stick it there in the new array. And then we take this second item in, whatever comes out, we stick it here. The third item in, we stick it here. And the fourth item, we pass it into the function, and whatever output we get, we stick there. And so we take everything in one by one and pass it through this function. It doesn't matter what the function does, but we just take whatever the output is and we store that into a new array. So if this is array, we'd call this mapped array. This would be like the mapped array. So every item has been transformed to this function. So if this function in here, let's say, for example, what this is doing is it's going to just return, x squared. We're just going to, square that, or let's just, we'll just do 2 times x. So we're just going to return, we're just going to double all the numbers. So what this would do here is, I'll draw this down below. But what we would do is so the 5 would come in, and then we'd end up with a 10 here. The 10 would come in, we'd end up with a 20 here. A 15 would come in, we'd end up with a 30, a 20, we'd end up with 40. Okay, so the callback function can be, is the customizable piece. It can do some custom piece of work on these different items, and it produces an output. This idea of a map, this is a universal concept that is used in many different programming languages. Okay, so with our map here, what we'll do is we'll have our const array, and then we'll just loop over array. Let's see, sorry.
Okay, here's what I
bumped the little story button. All right, so for let I get 0, I less than array dot length I plus plus. Then what we're going to do is we're going to get the const transform value. I'm breaking this out into some different variables so it's a little easier to understand. And it's going to be cv of array index I. Then we're going to go mapped array dot push transform value. At the very end of our function, we return the mapped array. Okay. So we create a new empty array. We loop over the array we're given, and then we just take every item that's in it, pass it through our callback function, and whatever we get back, that output, we go and we push it into our new array. And so then at the very end, we return that array. So the new array, we're going to make this a const. And so different companies will have different standards there. In our course, I know in our documentation, we use let in a lot of places. We're actually going to go through and edit that and change that. So we're going to use const for all of our arrays, even though we're modifying the array. It's still valid syntax. It has to do with what the reference is pointing to in memory. It's something that we can go into more in depth another day. Let's see. So you can use let, but then it's better practice to use const. So let and var would work here, and so they all work, and the program will run. But it's a good habit to be using const because in some situations it'll be better and help you catch bugs before they get too big. Oh. And you're welcome, Elizabeth. Happy to break it down. So let's see, Abe, not sure how to say your name, but I used array.forEach with callback for each array. Does this work? Yep, that works great. For each is preferable, but when you're first learning, it's good to learn how to use for loops to go over arrays. But eventually, you're going to want to use .for each everywhere in JavaScript. Okay, so if you're doing const with an array, as long as you're just doing like a push or something on the array, then that's valid. If you're like overriding the variable or changing what it points to, then anyway, then that wouldn't work. Let's see, Aaron thought we had to use .map for this. If you used just .map for this, that's fine as well. So if you did that, that's right here. The salt set 2. But more of the point of this was to kind of break it out. If you solved it the other way too, that's fine. But this breaks it out so you can kind of see conceptually what's more going on or what's happening. Okay, so the difference between map and for each is that in for each, if you return stuff, it doesn't get saved anywhere when you do a for each. So for each is just iterating over the items and passing them into the callback. Save what comes back from the callback, and for each we don't care. Yeah, somebody spotted my little fat arrow, my fat arrows around here. I'll talk about that in a little bit. That was just some of my other notes that I just like when I ran through this real quick to test all just make sure I had working solutions real quick before the lecture. Anyway, that's a new type of function in ES6 called an arrow function, and I'll talk about that a little bit. That's something that that we dive into more in depth later. But yeah, it's a new, essentially it's a function shorthand syntax for making a simple function. And so this right here is actually a function, and I'll break it down for you guys in a little bit. Okay, all right. So I was mapping for each this class one and then the prototype one real quick. Okay, so the class one. So again, I'm just returning the class. Like you can stick them on the same line like that, and then it will. Or just return the class that we're generating. Then the constructor takes an options object. We just assign the different properties: username, name, email, password. That's all written right here. And then for this this function, say hi. We're doing this thing: return hello. My name is. Boom. Okay, so this is something you probably haven't seen before. Maybe you've seen this on Stack Overflow or on some of the docs, but here's called a string template in JavaScript or ES6. So again, this is another new feature, and this is one that when we get into our course, we teach you about a lot of these new features, and we intend you to use this. So essentially what this does is instead of doing string concatenation where we're doing a plus sign, so another way to write this would be so right here, there's obviously breaking because I have two return statements. This is not valid, but this is the old way of doing it. And right now you might think like, well, is it really better? But let's say that after the string mark, you know, it is nice to like, or something like that. Hello, my name is blank. You know, my email is, you know, and you wanted to add it in. It's a lot easier to use this type of syntax to add things into the middle of a string instead of using pluses. You know, up here we'd have to break it out. And anyway, so it's just kind of, there's different syntax, and so it's just a little more of a shortcut syntax. So again, this dollar. So the key thing is with this quote mark, instead of using a quote mark to finish up the string, use a backtick. The backtick is to the left of the 1 on your keyboard. Backtick, there's a little squiggly, that's the tilde, and then there's the backtick, which is, yeah, that thing. So the backtick is how you open and close the string template. And then when you do that, it's going to look for a $ curly brace, and that will indicate that we're going to put some JavaScript in there. And inside of this, inside of these brackets, we can put any JavaScript we want. I mean, you could actually do something like, you know, 5, and then that will evaluate, and you would get hello, my name is 25. And so, anyway, so just like plugs it in there. So it has to be backticks, and then this is how you inject JavaScript into the string. So it makes it a little easier to build out your strings. So you weren't expected to know that, so your solution didn't need to be like this. So I'm just teaching it to you now, using this as a moment to introduce it to you. Let's see. Yeah, you're asking them place the value returned from CB into the new array. Yeah, just equals push it in. Yep. Yeah. And so you could have done it a different way. Like it would have been, push is the easiest. We could have done something like, you could have done like mapped array and index size equal to, so you could have done something like that, and that would have done the same thing essentially. 1 second. Okay, all right. So class is pretty straightforward. All right, for add prototype method, so we get the constructor, and it has an uppercase letter. So the constructor comes down, and then we're just adding it to the prototype. So constructor.prototype.say hi, and then we return the constructor after we modify it. So right here, what this is doing is we are adding a function. This right here is defining a function. So let me break this out onto another line. Okay. So with an arrow function, so these right here, these 2 lines are pretty much equivalent. Arrow functions have kind of changed the way that this behaves. That's something that we can talk about later. And so I'm just showing you this is a shortcut. So the fat arrow essentially takes the place of using the function keyword. And then right here we put this string, and it automatically adds in a return statement by default. And so it's going to return this by default. So there's a couple different ways you can use arrow functions, and babel.js.io, and it explains all the different things in here and has different examples. So arrow functions is one of the big changes with the new ES7 stuff. So I'll go and paste that into the questions Slack. But anyway, you can go in and check this out. And this has more stuff about classes and all that good stuff. You could also look on MDN. They would have some stuff about it too. Again, it's just more of a syntax thing. It does have some slight behavior differences, but you don't need to worry about that right now. Okay. All right. Okay. Now we're going to dive into some new stuff. Okay. Today's lesson should be, or material that we're covering should be a lot easier I imagine it will feel a lot easier than the stuff that we covered yesterday or the day before. Or last week, I guess. Okay. So JSBin is a good place to play around with this stuff that we're going to talk about today. Today we're going to talk about HTML and CSS. So I used this analogy earlier in the course where I described JavaScript as kind of like the plumbing and the electricity in your house, and it makes everything work and run and go. Well, HTML is more of like the structure of the house. It's the materials, and the CSS is how we make everything look pretty and stick it all together. So back in the old day, your HTML pages or web pages all looked pretty plain, and all looked kind of back great. Then CSS came along and makes it a lot easier for us to make our pages look a lot better and make them look really fancy, and you can do cool stuff with them. One of my favorite web pages is stripe.com. I think this is such a cool web page. And these are little animations where they have these different HTML elements that they're moving around. This is such a beautiful design and layout. Things you can do with CSS now, and so now we don't have to have these bland and repetitive looking pages. So anyway, so CSS is pretty cool. So first of all, let's talk about HTML, and then we'll dive into CSS and how we attach that and use all of that. So if you right click on a web page and you click on inspect, actually let's go to a page that has more going on. So we'll go to cnn.com, right click, do an inspect, and we see that it brings up all of this stuff. So this is what the web page actually looks like. So over here on this left panel, we have all the different HTML elements. So you can go through here and we can expand them and go through. And I'm going to talk about what these different elements are. We see a head, we have a body, things called divs and iframe and script. So we're going to talk about these different tags or these different elements and what they mean and how to use them. So anyway, so it's kind of fun. So I can come down and because when you go to a web page, what's happening is you type in a URL. So like a domain name, cnn.com. And so my computer is going to go out over the internet and it's going to talk to other computers and they're going to send the code for the web page down to my computer. And so all this HTML and CSS and JavaScript, it's on my computer. And so because it's on my computer in my browser, I can go in and mess with it. This doesn't change it on anyone else's computer, but I can go in and and totally change all of this. So like in the body, just like a quick little example, like background color instead of white. So #FE, FE, FE, that means white. Or it's a kind of a little bit of an off-white. Just make it green, make it a really ugly green color. And that may not have been targeted right. Well, okay, so it kind of did, but let me get this stuff on top. There we go. All right, great. All right, so you can go through and change stuff. And this is why, like, sometimes if you see screenshots of like tweets on Twitter and stuff, like you can go in there and just like pull this up and then you can like change everything and then take a screenshot of it. And so anyway, so that's like you'll see like jokes of people doing that. Like they're not actually, most of the time they're not actually doing like Photoshop. It's because you can actually just pull this up and just like change it all on your screen. So I could just come in and like change this right here, like. Oh, anyway, there, the headline has been changed. So anyway, so kind of fun. You can come in and mess around with it. So there's all the HTML elements, the stuff on the right panel. This is the CSS. So now let's go through, talk about some specific HTML elements, what they do, what they represent, how we use them, and then we'll talk about CSS, how we can start to make them look pretty and how we can modify them. Okay. All right. So let's go back in here. Okay, so the first ones I want to talk about, some of the basic HTML elements. The first one is an HTML. So the HTML one, we have there's two parts to it. We have an opening and closing part of the tag. And so, oh yeah, so again, back up a second a little bit. So HTML is not a programming language, it's a markup language. And what that means is that in JavaScript, we have functions and loops and if statements, control flow stuff, variables. We can do math, all that kind of stuff. With this, we don't. This purely just controls the presentation. It's kind of like if you remember back in school when you had like Microsoft Word and you're writing an essay and you're trying to format it and do stuff like that. It's like right now we're manually controlling the layout of the page and everything. Like that's what the HTML is doing. So it's very much about presentation. It's not about logic and yeah, all that stuff. So HTML, this is just the base element that everything else is going to be nested inside of. So another one we have is the head. We're going to have a head up at the top. Everything that goes in the head is stuff that will not actually be seen by the user when the page is rendered. So none of this stuff is seen, but it has information about the page. So one of them, an important one, is the title tag. Okay, so again, the way to read this, we have an opening tag, we have a closing tag. The closing tag has this little slash on it. Here's a closing HTML tag. Some elements are self-closing, and we'll get to those in a little bit. But these ones right here so far all have closing tags. So, when it's nested, when a tag is nested inside of another one, we indent it over to the right one level, and this makes it easier to see what is sitting inside of what. If it was all over to the left, it would be impossible to decipher and read it once this got beyond like 20 lines of code or 100 lines of code. So, okay, so HUD, head, title. So the title, so I wonder if this will even change anything on here. Nope. Okay. So the title affects what you see up here, like in the tab. So up here we see Sketchpad, Draw, Create, Share, Learn ES 2015, Babel. ES 2015 and ES6 are the same thing. With JSBin, all that. So what you can do is go up and with the title, you can anyway, the title determines what you see up at the top of the page. The title is also read by the search engines. So if you've heard about search engine optimization, it's all about making your page easy to read by the search engines, because what Chrome or what Google and Bing and all those search engines, and what they do is they have programs that run out and then they pull down all the web pages on the internet, they read them, and then they catalog them. So that way when people search for certain things, they have this like catalog built up of like where different web pages are that relate to certain topics. So yeah, let's keep it civil and not bring any politics into what we got. So, but yeah, what we anyway. So they call them crawlers. They go out and they pull down all these websites, make a catalog. That catalog can be used as a reference when we're search. That's why Google can point you in the right direction for a website so quickly. It's because in the background, they are always going through and downloading and reading all these web pages, and they're checking every web page out there. So, and then like updating these like records. And so that's how they work at a very, very high level. Okay, so the head, again, just stuff about the page. And there's some things we can do here to include our CSS files and stuff like that. All right, so now the next one is our body. Okay, this is where we're going to be sticking stuff that the person can see. Okay, so body, this is where all a lot of our really interesting stuff is going to go. Inside of body, there's some different elements we're going to use. One of them is a p tag, which stands for paragraph. We can see this updates over on the right. We can see none of these other elements have affected what we see so far. But then this paragraph tag, we see the text printing out. All right, and then with the span, okay, the next one, and this is I'm just going down the list of that README in the homework assignment, and so this has all the major elements you'll need to know for today. There's others that we're not going to cover, but these are a lot of the main ones. And so again, if you want to go in there and kind of peek at it and follow along, so you can do that. So we have a span tag. So it's just like a generic container. It doesn't it doesn't add any. It doesn't really affect the flow of the page very much. And so like a paragraph tag is going to create a new line. It's going to like, for example, if I go down and put another paragraph tag, it's automatically going to be down on another line. Even if I were to go up and stick it on the same line in my HTML, it still gets spaced down into a new line. So the paragraph tag does that by default. Span tags don't, but spans we use for containing text. And later when we get into CSS, we'll use the span sometimes to like target specific words or things like that in our content that we're displaying. Okay. All right, span. The next one is called a div. All right, so this is a generic container. It's used mainly for styling. It's like a box that you can determine the exact size and color and place other boxes in it. And so we'll often use divs to divide up the page. So so a common flow is that you'll have like inside your body tag, you'll have a couple divs of content that are breaking out the different sections on the web page. So you have a div and then paragraph tag and stick a bunch of text in there. So the div also breaks stuff down onto the next line. So if I come down and put some stuff here, it's automatically down on the next line. Also due to the div, the div mimics that behavior of the p tag as well. Okay, all right, so now the next one that I want to talk about is an anchor tag. I'll make another div here. Okay, so an anchor tag is how we create links between web pages. So CNN, and then this will be what we do here is we say href. Let's see. Oh, got a typo. There we go. All right, so now this is how we make a link. So if I click on that, you see it pulled up the web page. Okay, so this right here is one of our first introductions to attributes. So we have these attributes that we can stick, opening tags, and these attributes allow us to specify just the way that we want these elements to be configured. So here on the anchor tag, we're saying when the user clicks on the anchor tag, take them to this this URL. So navigate them to this page. So, okay. All right, anchor tag, I got a few more. So let's talk about our header tags. Top. H1, web page. My web page, we have some paragraph of text, I have a link. So the H1 indicates this is the major header for the entire page. And so it's going to make the text really big by default. We can go in and modify and change the text. You can change the font, you can do all that. But an H1 is also read by the search engines, and they use that to determine what your page is about. Or specify this is the content for like this is what our page is all about. This is the main header, and so there are things other than H1s. So we can go. It goes from H1 to H6, and one is the most important. It's the biggest one. H6 is the smallest one. So generally, like on a web page, you'd maybe see something like it's like on this page, like Learn ES 2015. This right here is probably an H1. But then like introduction, these features, like this might be an H2, this might be an H2, maybe arrow and lexical, this is an H3. So you kind of break it down into smaller sections. And we can inspect and actually look at it. So it's an H3, yeah. So classes is an H3. As we scroll up, I can click on this little thing here and it lets me check another one. So this one is an H2. Yep, that one's an H2. And then Learn ES 2015 should be an H1. Yep, it is. So H1, Learn ES 2015. So you can see here that kind of the most important heading is an H1, and then you break them down into the smaller ones as you go down. Okay, so on your page, you should only have one H1, and then you'll have a couple H2s, and then inside of the H2s, you'll have H3s. And anyways, that's how you headers. That's what you do with your different headers. Okay, images. All right. So down below this anchor tag, I'll put an image. All right, so an image is our first self-closing tag that we're learning about. So with the image tag, we actually we don't put a closing one. It's just, so the closing slash goes inside of itself right here. So the anchor tag is, all these other ones have closing tags, opening and a closing one. Image doesn't, and there's a few others that don't. Most of them do have a closing tag. Okay, so with image, we have a property in here called src, and that's where we put a URL as to where our image is stored. So let's do, there we go. So I'm going to copy the image address. Oh, this might be huge. Okay. All right. So because it came from Google search, it's a huge long image address, but I just pasted it in right there. That's going out over the internet and it's grabbing the image and bringing it in. So there's our little puppy image. Okay. All right. Well, maybe actually let's do this. Let me get a shorter one so then it Google search images will be. Let's see. Where's a non-political? Let's do this picture. Copy image address. All right, so a little iPhone big thing. Well, I'll just delete this whole line. Make another one from scratch. So image src. Is this in here? That's still pretty long. Not as long. So anyway, image URLs get pretty long, but anyway, so there's our image as it prints out. Okay, so pretty straightforward. All right, the next thing we want to add to our page, we want to talk about unordered lists. I'll make another div here. Okay, an unordered list. This is where we're going to make a list of items. So we have UL, an opening UL, and a closing UL tag, and then inside of it, we're going to have opening and closing LIs. So list items. So we have list items inside of our unordered list. And we scroll down, we see some dots that it adds automatically. You can remove those. Item 1, 2. All right, so So just like you can put a bunch of text inside of it, you can put links inside of it, things like that. So down here we'll have some different items. Often an unordered list, what we'll do with styling is we use this for buttons, and then we like change them to make them sit side by side. So up here, like this HTML, CSS, JavaScript console output, this is probably an unordered list with a bunch of buttons on it. If we go back to cnn.com, all this stuff up here, this is probably an unordered list that we make to sit sideways. Up here, these are most likely an unordered list. If we come in and inspect on it, we'll see, yes, it is an unordered list. This nav bar, and there's a bunch of LIs inside of it. And inside of the LIs, they have anchor tags. So the cool thing is with these tools, you can go in and look at web pages and see how they structured things. And that's a good way to learn. So we'll see, let's, let me go ahead and inspect this stuff too. So that's, sometimes it's tricky to like actually make sure you're accessing it without clicking on it. Okay. So let's expand that. All right. So these are they just have a div with a bunch of anchor tags in it that they make to sit side by side. So you don't always use the unordered list that way, but different websites will do it different ways. I think generally it's considered a better practice to do it with an unordered list, but anyway, okay. Or divs and anchor tags. So you've seen examples both ways. So it just shows how you can do this. There's lots of different ways you can approach it. Yeah, Emmet's a really good extension you can use with VS Code, especially with HTML. It's just to add some really good autocomplete stuff. Yeah, definitely go check that out. Okay, all right, so these are all the HTML elements that I wanted to talk about today. And how we can go in here and style these. I actually pasted my example code inside of the questions channel so you guys can see that. A little bit of a delay, so you'll see my code appearing before you see me talk about it. All right, so now let's talk about CSS. All right, so all right, so up inside of our header, where we have stuff that's not being displayed on the page, we can stick things, another tag called a style tag. And inside of the style tag, we can write CSS. And so the code will change in here. It's not going to look like HTML. It's going to be CSS. We can write it between the opening and closing style tags. And with CSS, we can go in and do some fancier modifications to the page. So the first thing that we need to be able to do with CSS is we have to. So if we want to change the color of the text, let's say we want to change our LIs, we want to change all the text, or let's say we want to change this paragraph to be red. We want the color of the text to be red. The way that we do that is we have to have we have to be able to target the elements somehow. We have to be able to select the paragraph tag. So a couple different ways of doing this. I'm going to start walking you through some of them. So the first one is I can just type in P like this, and this is going to select all of the it's going to select all the paragraph tags. Actually, there's an experiment here, so I'll just make sure this works real quick. But yeah, P, and then what we'll do is we'll say color is red. Okay, we see that it changed to red. And now if I add another paragraph tag, say down below, down here, we come down and we see another P tag, and it's red as well. So all the paragraph tags, this right here will set all paragraph tags to red. Okay. Let's say we just wanted one of the paragraph tags to be red. Well, let's go back here. We can do things like there we go. So you can do a comma after it too, and you can say this will turn all the P's and all the divs red. This pretty much turns all the text red. So right here we have the paragraph tags and the anchor tag are both red. Now let's see the paragraph tags and the LIs. The LIs are red and the paragraphs are red. So so it's pretty broad, a pretty broad style that's targeting. So now what we're going to do is let's try to get a little more specifics. And so let's say that we want to target, like we only want some of the paragraph tags to have red text. And so what we can do here is we can define what's called a class. So there's another attribute. You can put a class on any HTML element. So this is kind of like, the href or the src, the source. So the class, we type in a name of a class, and it's like a little identifier tag that we can stick on an element that we can use in our CSS to target things. Red text. Now up in here, I can type in dot red text. And the dot means it's a class. So it means look for all the elements that have the class red text and then apply these styles to them. So I can say color red, and I can put some other, other styles down below, and I'll walk you through that in a little bit. But this is going to target all of the elements that have a class of red text. So this one has a class of that, but the other p tag down here doesn't, and so this one does not. Its text does not become red. So there's another. Anyway, but now we can go and we can apply this same red text class to any elements that we want, and they will turn red. You can add multiple classes to an element. So if we go in and look at this in here, we'll see like class up here. It has nav menu links link. That's like a big long class because they probably have a massive style sheet with tons of stuff on it. You can see how you can add lots of different styles onto each element. So like border right, font weight, letter spacing, line height, margin, padding. These are all different styles, and we're going to talk about some of these in a moment. So again, the class here just has one. Let me find one that has multiple classes. Okay, so this one right here. This one has classes for add epic, add all, t-light. So it has 4 different classes on it. And so it looks like it has something to do with like their in-page advertising, but I have an ad blocker, so it's not showing up. Yeah, so you can see how you can add multiple classes in it, just like that. Okay, so this is, again, it's called a class. And so if you're wanting to reuse it in multiple places, that's called a class. There's another one that we can use called an ID. And so blue text. Okay, so an ID function is very similar to the other one. I'm going to move this class down to this one. And then up here, I'm going to say ID. But usually what we put here is this will be header. Something like that. Okay. So an ID is very similar to a class. Some important distinctions. Anything that if you have an ID and a class on the same element, the ID, the classes that are specified by the ID overwrite the ones specified on the class. Okay. All right. And then if I did, so if our red text class, we have it on our H3. Well, actually, let's look at our paragraph tags. So our paragraph tag right here is a class of red text. Right here, if I set all of my paragraphs to green text, one is green text, but this one right here. So what happens is that the classes will override general styles like this, and IDs will override class styles. Okay, so there's this hierarchy, and this is just the beginning of it. There's a whole bunch of different like rules and it's called specificity, and there's a lot that this goes into. There's different more advanced ways you can target and how it gets sorted and stuff like that. But in the first thing to know is just that IDs will overwrite classes. Classes will overwrite just general styles on elements. Okay, so an ID should only be used once on your page. So an ID should be for one specific element, and then it's not intended to be used anywhere else. We can reuse, but an ID should be for one unique spot. You should default to a class. Use classes most of the time. Don't use IDs very much. Use mostly classes, and then that will prevent some CSS headaches down the road. Because you can get issues where you're trying to, like, if you have an ID setting a bunch of styles and you need to override it, but then anyway, it can create some issues. So use IDs sparingly, but then use classes primarily. Okay. All right, so this is the basics of targeting elements, and again, this is all in there. So we're going to talk about some different styles now. So again, color is for the actual the element. Background color is for the background of the element. So now you see this one sets the background to this ugly green color on all the elements. Okay. All right, we're going to talk about something called the box model. So I'm going to clear all this stuff out now. Paste that in so you guys can see that. I'm gonna clear this all out. Yeah, get rid of that. Okay. So now we're just left with we have our styles and we have our body right here. Okay. So what we're gonna do now is let's make a div. And we're just gonna have one div on our page. So we're gonna use an ID, call my div. And that's how we target it, my div. So there is a height and width property on all elements. So I can give it a height of, I'm going to say 200 px. That stands for pixels. There's a height and width, and you're like, well, I can't see it now. So divs by default are see-through. They're transparent. Let's give it a color. All right, so there's a big yellow box. Okay. All right, so this sets the height. So again, the vertical height. Width is the width across. Blue. So let's set the width to 300 pixels. Now we see it's wider than it is tall. So that's a rectangle. Okay. All right. So the height and width, that controls the those dimensions. On the we have, well, let me put something up here. We have what's called the box model in CSS. And if I scroll down here, there's a picture of it. So the box model. So every element is made up of these specific pieces. So our div or our paragraph tags, our LIs, they all have their content, padding, border, margin. And so these are the different pieces that make up the element. And so if I come back in here, what we can do is if we inspect the element, you can come down in here and view it as well on the right, and we see that it is 300 pixels by 200 pixels, and there's no padding, there's no border, there's no margin. Okay, so let's come in and play around with the border. So let's give the box a border now. Border, 1 pix, solid, black. Let's make it 15 pixels. All right. So now I give it this big black border. Okay. So the border goes around the edge of the elements. The margin is the distance between our element and the other stuff around it. So I can say margin left 15 pixels, and we see it moves it, shifts it to the right because now there is a space there to the left of the element. The margin, if I pull up this inspector, then we'll come through and you can take a look at this. So hover over it, we see this orange stuff on the left. To the left of the black, if I hover over it, then it goes away. But that orange stuff to the left, that's the margin. So it's creating space between our element and the stuff on the left. If we can add a margin to the top. We give it some spacing from the top of the page. 50 pixels, and we see it pushes it down. And so now this element has 50 pixels up there. See, AV is asking, do we teach advanced CSS and HTML in the program as well? Yeah, so we teach mobile optimization, so how to make web pages look really good on mobile phones and tablets and how to optimize it and do all that. Yeah, and we go over Flexbox and more advanced things like that. So yeah, we go pretty deep into that. It's definitely more focused on like the programming side of things and the behavior side. That's a little harder, but yeah, we do cover just the fundamentals there. It's advanced. We cover some pretty advanced stuff there. All right. So margin. So again, margin is on the outside. Then we have our border, and then the next thing. Let me put a. All right, so we have this h1 tag that is now inside of the div. Padding, what padding does, padding is the space between the contents of an element and the edge. So this space right here between the high and the edge of the wall, or the border, we use padding to create more space there. And in our README, it goes over some more advanced definitions of how you like calculate the size of the element, like the contents, and like the width includes the padding, and anyway, just how the border and the margin I'll factor in. But anyway, you can read more about that. In the homework. But the main things to worry about here: we have our content that's in the center of the element. We have the padding, which is between the content and the edge, and then we have the border, and then we have the margin. So, so if we were to switch this, and let's make this a paragraph tag with some text in it, height down to, let's see, 100 pixels. Let's do 50 pixels. All right. Here's some text inside of our element. Let's say we want some space between the top and bottom. We can do padding top, and then let's say 15 pixels. So now it's off the top. Now let's change the color to white. Yeah, all right. And so white on dark is usually pretty jarring and is generally considered not as easy to read. That's why most web pages have a white background. The vast majority of web pages have white backgrounds, and beginners will try to break that rule, but generally just stick with a white background. That's what everyone uses, because it works better. Okay, so again, color is the color of the text. Background color is the background color of the element. Border, the first item is how thick the border will be. First one is dotted. So like you can change the style of the border. Hashed, so you can change that. So now it's like for a coupon. And then white or red. And the colors don't have to be just like blue, yellow, white. They don't have to be in English. So there's different ways that you can represent colors. We get into some more advanced CSS stuff later, but you can represent them with hex values. This is the hexadecimal representation of a color. And so some of them can be simplified to 3 colors, but so like right here with this blue, if I click on it, it actually produces a little dropper thing, and I can use that to find colors. So like, let's say I want this blue right here. And so we can see here that this is the hex value, and you can go in and copy it out if you want. So I can copy this, and then I can go and paste that in. You can also shift between another one that's called RGBA, so red, green, and blue values. And so what we can do here is we can go RGB, and we can go like, okay. So 100, 100, 100 is a shade of gray, and 40, and I'm just randomly guessing here. I have no idea what these are going to produce, but this is produced some shade of blue. You can do an A value, which is an alpha value, which is how transparent it is. And so I can say like 0.1. So then it's pretty transparent. 0.9. I only color right now off the border, but it might not even accept that for the border property. But you can have a semi-transparent elements like over the tops of things. So I think even on the Lambda School website, we have an element that is so right here we have this semi-transparent blue div that's over the top of this picture, and then that just gives it kind of a fun feel. So those are different ways that you can specify colors. I just usually write out blue, white, yellow, red when I'm just teaching, because it's a fast way to throw a color in. Okay. Oh yeah, one other one, font size. You know, we can use pixels here. There's different units that we can use other than pixels. You can use a percentage. You can there's some other things there, but M's and N's and some different things. But pix is pretty common, especially for font size. And then some of the other ones will. That's a discussion for another day. All right, so fun stuff here. So we have CSS. HTML. The last thing we're going to talk about is, it would get very unwieldy for us to have all of our CSS inside of one file like this, like inside of a style tag. And so what we can do here is we can write it in a new tag, and then we can use what's called a link tag. And then this will point to CSS file that would be in the same folder. This one's also self-closing. This one doesn't really work in here because I don't have a style sheet created, but let me just, I'll go in and create some folder real quick. So if I go into lesson 6, go to our homework, there's going to be a homework.html file that's created. So this is where you're going to do your work. And then inside of the same folder, we can create a new file, and I'm going to call this styles.css. All right, so that's sitting next to the homework.html file. So let's go HTML. Oh, wait, no, I'm in the CSS file. I need to take off the hitting a hotkey somehow, triggering that. Okay, like command space or something. All right. Okay, so let's do our HTML tag. Oh, auto completed. And then let's do our head, and then our body. All right, so instead of our body, I'm just going to do an H1. A web page. I'll give it an ID of header. All right, so what we can do here now is I can say link rel style sheet. So it's the style sheet that we're bringing in, and then we do href. That's a self-closing tag. All right, so this / says, look in the same folder that the same folder that the HTML file is in. That's what the / is. If the styles file was up a folder, then you would put 2 dots. So we'd go up one. If there was another folder in here, like assets or something, then that styles is in, and this is how you do it. So this is a path to the file that we're writing. And so the / means just look in the same folder that we're in. Okay, I'll show you how we can go in and test this in a moment too. There's our stuff here. So we have our header. I give it an ID of header. So now if I come in here, header, it's color blue. All right. So now I can go here. I can do reveal in Finder. Try the best way to, there might be an easier way to do it. But now if I open up this file, it's going to open it up instead of Chrome. We see the URL, it's saying like users Ben Nelson Lambda School Pre-Course Lesson 6 HTML CSS homework.html. So it's the path to it on my computer, but it opens up the HTML in my browser. And so then I can go in and edit it. I can use all of these inspecting tools that we've been using on all those other pages. We can come in here and do all this stuff. So here's my header and modify the styles. All right, instead of blue, I want it to be this. I use my little picker, color picker thing. I want it to be, well, I guess it has to be on the page. I'll get this like weird pink thing that's generated in the shadow there. Okay, so you can go in and modify stuff. It doesn't change it in your file. So if I refresh the page, it goes back, but it allows you to come in and kind of mess around with things and display it in real life. Yeah, so you're going to have to create the styles file, and that's part of the homework. That's all in your instructions. What you can do is if you click on the folder homework, if you right click on it, you can select a new file, and that creates the file styles.css. So that's part of the homework, is creating the style sheet. And then, yeah, you can come in and then write all your styles in here, and then they will interact with all of the elements in this page. And this is how you do it. Style sheets and HTML files. This is what the web page is, the internet is built off of. And then later we'll teach you how to link your JavaScript files in with this and how you can connect your JavaScript with all this stuff. So, all right. Fun stuff. HTML, CSS, a little more visual today, a little more fun. Let's see. All right. Let's see. The homework says there should be one. Okay. Well, let me double check. So I think, okay, so that, well, if you look on line 38, it says create an external style sheet and then import all the previous style rules into the new style sheet. So you're going to create the new style sheet. But yeah, so I can see how that would be confusing. So I should go in and clear that up. So sorry about that. All right. Okay, fun stuff. HTML, CSS. If you're interested in coming to do any of our other courses or our full-time courses, we'd love to, talk to you about it and answer any questions you have. But yeah, we'll break for now and have some fun. Just coloring your pictures tonight for homework, and then we'll get into some more advanced CSS stuff tomorrow with like positioning and all of that. And then our final lesson will be how we connect JavaScript to all of this and how we can use JavaScript to dynamically change things and modify the HTML and CSS and do some cool stuff. Cool. So fun stuff. Change of pace. This is a nice change of pace from all the crazy JavaScript stuff you guys have been working on. Yep. So cool. Have a good night, everyone. Talk to you later.